When I was little in Sunday school, every time that this passage would come up in our Sunday school lessons, I thought about my two sisters. I thought about all the times when we would fight, when we would be jealous, when I would be jealous, or we'd be angry at each other. I thought about all the divisions and the sibling rivalry that we went through. And sometimes I wondered if we would ever become friends. If when we grew up and were adults, would we really be the friends that I hoped one day we would be? And then as I got older and we started to become friends, maybe I was giving up some of my childish ways. I didn't think about this passage so much, at least not in that way. If I did think about it, I did think about the fact that as the youngest of three girls, I could relate pretty well to Jacob. Now today, we're in a COVID-19 world. We're also in a COVID-19 world. And when I hear this passage, I start to hear it in a new way. I'm more in touch with the disparities in relationships between white people and black and brown people, between people of privilege and people without privilege, between those who not only expect but demand the basic rights that all human beings should have, against those who can't even get the basic rights of health care and equal pay and to be treated with dignity and respect. Since the murder of George Floyd, I have engaged in a practice every morning of spending 8 minutes and 46 seconds thinking about my own issues of privilege, thinking about my own privilege and thinking about what's happening in the world and what my role needs to be in living out and living into a new reality in our society. In those 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I start to think about different situations that have happened in my life and places where I've acted or not acted in ways that I should. Sometimes I've thought about what I need to be doing differently or better or just in a different way. And whatever I think about during that time, I find that I carry with me throughout the day. And when something happens, I might act differently or at least think about it differently because of the thoughts that have stayed with me in that time. It's become an incredibly powerful practice for me. As I read this morning's reading from Genesis, I started reading it with a different lens than I've ever read it before. The relationship of fighting and one-upping that characterizes Esau and Jacob, the stronger brother who gives up his birthright because he's hungry and he wants some food. And then the greed of the younger brother who knows how to twist just the right way to get his brother to give up what he wants in exchange for some food. There's the son who is the pride of his father, and the son who is loved and cared for by his mother in a unique and special way. Esau was hungry, and Jacob used that fact as an opportunity to steal from him his birthright, to make sure that that Jacob would be able to secure his place of power in the family. Esau was hungry. Jacob was seeking power. Our Associate General Minister of the United Church of Christ, Reverend Karen Georgia Thompson, in this week's Weekly Seeds for our denomination of sermon preparation blog that many of us as ministers receive, she said about this passage, themes of greed and exploitation should cause us to take pause. This is by no means a happy story. It is the making of tragedy. Loss of humanity robs one of his human dignity, and broken relationships within the family abound. Both brothers provide case studies for the human condition and beg reflection on the ways in which we live in relationship with one another. Issues of justice and care for community are highlighted in this exchange. Are we really willing to give to each other in times of need, or do we find ways to promote personal gain? Who are the people who lose what they have to eat and what they need to live? There is so much brokenness in our world right now. There are so many places that need the witness that our deep faith can offer. It is our time. It is our time to come together and go out into the world and make a difference. And we need to be willing to take that first step. It is our time to look at our siblings who are hungry, who are struggling with the basic needs of humanity, food, shelter, medical care, and a decent living wage. And what is our role in the world to make that happen? For me, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds are being spent understanding how I am a lot more like Jacob than I even thought I was, but not in the way that I used to think of as a child. I'm not thinking of my role as Jacob as the one who is the youngest and always getting the short end of the stick and scraping my way just to get a little bit of what I think is mine. No, I am thinking about Jacob, who is willing to sacrifice my sibling and what my sibling has a right to, in order to make sure that I continue to have what I need and what I want, because I think I need that to thrive. I think I need it to maintain my power and privilege. There is energy around the examination of our own privilege and our own story. Every day I've been receiving emails from people within our conference, each telling me about the ways that they are examining their own privilege and sharing with me the work that is happening in their churches and in their lives around this topic. We're going to be doing a racial justice training later this week, and we had 58 people who signed up for this. There is a willingness and an openness to learn and to talk to one another, to offer deep listening to another person's sacred story. For myself, I have never felt more clear about where God is leading me in my call than I do at this very moment. The 8 minutes and 46 seconds I spend each morning are 8 minutes and 46 seconds that turn into 48 minutes and more, that turn into hours and more hours, because I carry them throughout the day as an awareness in all my activities and everything that I do through the day. What is God and Spirit calling me to do? In some ways, I have eliminated some of the things in my life that could distract me from this important work. And I want to invite each one of you to take time to do the same. What are the things that are distracting you from taking that first step that Spirit is compelling you to take? If we spend time each day thinking about our own privilege and the work we need to do within ourselves, we are then able to show up and do the work and talk in the way that we need to talk to make transformative change happen in our world. It's up to us. We just need to take that first step. In a previous newsletter article, I talked about the pause that COVID-19 has given us. Most of us suddenly found ourselves in our home with all the everyday distractions of work, school, church, meetings, and for the most part, anything else that would distract us. We found all that gone, all of our distractions gone. And then as we sat inside our house and we looked out into the world from a different perspective, we were able to start seeing the world differently. We saw those who were deemed essential workers and yet are barely making enough money to scrape by and put food on their family's table, despite the fact that every day they're going outside of their home in order to provide goods and services that we need to live, that we need to allow us to stay in our homes and be protected. If they are essential enough to put their lives on the line every day by going out for us, why are we not insisting that they receive the pay that allows them to care for their families and meet their basic needs? And now, as the shelter in place begins to lift and we start to move away from our homes and back out into the world, maybe we're seeing that even though things aren't still the way that we remembered them from a few months ago, we're still seeing the world from a different perspective. We're seeing how we have woken up in this country and in our societies. We're witnessing the protest that started in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. For those of us, especially who are white, we are being awakened in a different way than we ever thought possible. Even if we thought we knew and understood all of the issues around race and privilege, we're learning that there's still more we don't understand. There's a narrative and a story that we didn't even know existed and now has become so clear to us. We are not distracted by the things that would fill our time. And so we're able to see the world through a lens that we never even knew existed. I believe all of this, COVID-19 and COVID-19 has awakened us to a way that shows us something big is about to happen. And we need to be a part of it. We need to find our place in that work. Whatever that first step might be, we need to go out and we need to be part of it because we are a people of faith. We are a people who are called by God to go out and be about the transformative change that we need in this world. In our conference, we have been offering small group conversations on race for about a year now. And when we met in early May, we were talking about how do we get energy behind these conversations, because we knew how these conversations have been transforming us, those of us who have been participating in them. And we wanted to get more and more people to give us the time to be part of these groups, because we really believed that as we began to have these conversations wider in our conference, the transformative change that was happening in us would allow us to work together to be people of faith going out into the world and making transformative changes that need to happen. And we were trying to think about how do we expand these groups? How do we invite people in a way that they see how important it is to be a part of it? And we knew that even if we had to do it one person at a time, we would slowly begin to expand, and eventually we would kind of on the teeter-totter, the fulcrum where it finally bends the other way, that we would finally reach the point where a lot of people started understanding what we were trying to do and were feeling like they wanted to be a part of it. And then May 25th, George Floyd was murdered by a white police officer in Minneapolis, and everyone in the country began to have a conversation that was very different than the conversations they were having on May 24th. And suddenly, people were interested in being part of the work that we were doing, part of the conversations. They were starting their own conversations, and they were beginning to invite others into that, and they were reaching out to say, how can we do this? How can we have more of these conversations? It was like almost overnight, everyone was talking in a different way. I received emails from people, I still receive emails from people who are asking me what the conference is doing. What kind of conversations are we having? And when I reply with the list of everything that we have been trying to do for the last year, they often seem surprised. It doesn't matter how much we tried to do before. It is now that people are listening. And now they want to know what's going on and they want to be a part of it. Now is the time. The first step that we take is crucial. What will your first step be? What is it that you are going to do today, this week, this month? What will be that first step of faith into a world that needs all of us working together for justice, to bring the Christ light to the places that need it the most, to live and act out of our faith for the good of all of humanity? What is the first step that you will take to confront your own privilege, whatever that privilege may be, and then to see how you can show up in a different way, in a way that is most needed? What is the project or the initiative that you have long thought, if only we could do this, it would make a difference? What is stopping you? Jessica Quinn, who is the online communications specialist for the UCC, wrote in a piece this week that came into my email. She said, "Fellow white people, come unpack some things with me. Our Black neighbor, our Indigenous neighbor, our non-white neighbor is and has been hurting from racism in which we participate. Perhaps recent events have encouraged us to seek more information. Let's not allow discomfort to prevent us from doing the work or continuing the journey. Let discomfort remind us of the emotion and exhaustion tied to the Black experience in this country. Let's acknowledge that privileges afforded by whiteness have allowed many of us to avoid these feelings of shame or guilt. Let's do the work without expectation of thanks, because it is our responsibility as people of faith to do so. God is very present in this moment. I can feel it. And our faith tells us that God works through us and moves in us and moves us to respond. Okay, sometimes God has to push us, but that's okay too. Who are we going to be in this work? Who are our co-conspirators who are going to join us in this work? Who are those people in your life who you trust enough to tell your dreams, to share your vision, to ask to be a co-conspirator with you in this work? Jacob's biggest mistake was that he was so desperate to make sure that he was taken care of that he didn't realize how he was wielding his privilege in order to receive power. When we can see that, we begin to understand how there may have been a different way that the two brothers could have resolved their conflict. The fighting from the time in their womb did not have to happen. If they had learned to take that first step towards one another, they would have discovered that there was enough food for all. There was enough inheritance for all. There was enough power for all. If they had figured out how to share, if Jacob had been willing to give up the power that he wielded to make sure that his brother had the food that he needed, that would have been a step in the right direction. That would have been a story that could have been rewritten to look very different in our world, very different in the call that God has put before us. And what might our story today in this time look like if we were to be part of the rewriting of it? What would it look like for those of us with power and privilege, even if sometimes we don't feel like we have any power and privilege? What would it look like for us to understand who we are, how we've lived, where we've come from, and where we're going in such a way that we can show up and act differently in the world? We can take that first step and that second and that third step so that we can be seeking those places that God needs us most in order to bring about a world where all people are valued, where all life is valued, all humanity is treated with the dignity and respect that God has created each one of us to have and to expect. Amen.